Friends, it's really good to be with you this morning. I hope you're encouraged. I know when you get up on a morning like this morning, it's perfect stay under your duvet weather this morning, isn't it? And if you're anything like me, that's exactly what you wanted to do when the alarm clock went off. But you've all managed to rouse yourself, get out of bed, get to here, and it's just wonderful to see a room full of churchwardens and a few other people from the diocese, all gathering together to see what it is that the Lord is saying to us at this point in the life of the Diocese of Sheffield as we seek to move forward. Some of you will be aware that we're in the midst of a kind of 12-month period of reviewing our strategy. That's a word that some people don't like, strategy. I recognise that. But actually, if you read the book of Acts and read it thinking strategy, you will see that the Apostle Paul and the other apostles had lots of strategy. They just sat light enough to it to allow the Spirit to direct them in other ways, if the Spirit wanted to. And that's the kind of thing we want to do as strategy, to work out what it is we believe God is saying to us as the church over the coming years, but to be able to step out into that, sitting light enough to it to allow the Spirit to move us where the Spirit wants to move us. So you'll probably be aware that we're in the midst of a kind of 12-month period where we're reviewing our existing strategy, saying, what is it, Lord, that you are leading us into in the next 9 or 10 years? And that the effect of that will be to kind of revitalise us, our energies, our thoughts, and give us the opportunity, and this is why it's a significant moment, to approach the national church for support and partnership to the tune of quite a lot of money, hopefully. I'll come on to that in a minute. But if you're in Sheffield and Rotherham Archdeaconry in particular, you'll probably be more aware of this than anything because I've not been very visible or very available as I normally am. So I'm helped over the period of this 12 months by Claire. Claire is here, Claire Dawson. Where is she? Wave, Claire. Claire is doing a brilliant job as the Assistant Archdeacon of Sheffield and Rotherham, doing most of my job for me while I'm able to kind of lead some of this strategy refresh work on behalf of the Bishop and the Bishop's staff team. So if you haven't yet met Claire and you're in Sheffield and Rotherham Archdeaconry, do go and say hello to her over tea and coffee so that she can kind of get to know you and where you're from as well. Over the next sort of 10 minutes or so, I want to just give you a bit of background as to what it is we're doing with the strategy refresh, what it is we're hearing so far through the consultation, and then get you doing a little bit of talking, and hopefully that will bring us to the end of a sort of half-hour-ish slot that I've got before I hand over to Sally. So, who has seen this picture? Has anybody seen this image? Okay, some of you will have seen this. If you can, just before I get on, who has so far had a deanery event this year? And a day where the bishop has been, one of the bishops has been in your deanery, visiting lots of things with me and Alex, and then we've had an evening with anybody coming. Just stick your hand up if you've been to one so far. We're about halfway through them. We've still got another few to do before the end of the year, but some of you have been to there. Well, last year when we did the deanery events, which was slightly different, this was an image that the bishops shared. And it was an image really to try and make sure that we get our priorities right. Because it's all too easy to let the tail wag the dog when we're talking about funding or money. It's all too easy to go after the money and not quite get right what it is God's saying to us. So this image works for some people, it doesn't for others. If you're one of those it doesn't work for, then just have a nap for about 10 seconds and then wake up. The image is of the landing capsule, which in any analogy of a rocket, that's what you want to get to its destination, whichever planet that might be. Our landing capsule is the diocesan vision. It's been the same for about 12 or more years. It's this really natty phrase that's really easy to remember, but says everything that we need it to say. In fact, this vision statement was one of 2 or 3 main things that attracted me to come to the Diocese of Sheffield, because it just says everything. It's brilliant. The Diocese of Sheffield exists to grow a sustainable network of Christ-like, lively and diverse Christian communities in every place, not for their own benefit just, but so that they are effective in making disciples and in seeking to transform our society and God's world. It's a big picture vision. And for some, it might seem a too big picture vision. St. Luke, in the book of Acts, tells us that at the time of Jesus' ascension, there were about 120 people following him. That's about the number that we've got in this room. Now there are 3.2 billion Christians in the world today, about a third of the world's population. And that doesn't even reflect on how many have now moved on and been with the Lord over the last 2,000 years, those that have died as followers of Jesus. 120 people empowered by the Holy Spirit literally transformed the world. So if you think this is too big a vision for God to achieve through us, just remind yourself of that story. That's what we're about. We want to see our communities transformed by the good news of Jesus Christ. We want to see people come into a relationship with Jesus and grow in that relationship. That's what we're trying to land. Now, the engine room is the strategy. And strategies will change from time to time, depending on what's going on. So we're in the midst of a 7-year strategy, which I'll just remind us of in a moment. And we're currently thinking, what goes beyond that? We've got another couple of years to run in that strategy. What's the next bit of the jigsaw that will help us to land that capsule? And then any funding that we get from the national church or from any other bodies is like the rocket fuel. That helps to propel the strategy, so the strategy enables us to get closer to landing the capsule. But the main thing is the main thing. It's the vision. That's what we're here for. So if you're suspicious about strategy, don't be, because strategy should always drive the vision. It should always enable us to get that bit closer to being this sustainable network of Christ-like light. I won't say it all again. Yeah? Does that make sense? I shared this image with I've shared it across the diocese with chapter groups, but also with other groups. And when I shared it with the environmental working group, they said, lovely image, I just wish it was a bit greener, which I thought. So then I started to work into, because of that, don't worry, it's hydrogen powered. And then I shared that with one chapter, forgetting that one of the clergy members on that chapter used to be a rocket scientist, I kid you not. And he sat there and went, Malcolm, they all are. So it's a hydrogen powered by sustainable energy, whatever. But the key thing is the nose. So our current strategy, we're 5 years, so a 7-year strategy, renewed, released, rejuvenated. You'll know it hopefully well, and what our priorities are within that. So renewed to focus ourselves back on God in prayer, to recognize that we are dependent upon the grace of God and the Holy Spirit working in and through us. The prayer community, just stick your hand up. This is not a name and shame. Stick your hand up if you're a member of the prayer community. Brilliant, it's good to see people around. Stick your hand up if you pray roughly every day. Oh, lots more people. Keep your hand up if in your prayers is the Lord's Prayer, pretty much every day. And keep your hand up if, as well as praying every day, you read just a little bit of the Bible. It doesn't, it might be a few verses, okay? Now keep your hand up if you also pray the diocesan vision prayer. Okay, now that's not a name and shame. Those that had their hands up until that point, if you could also think, I'll pray the diocesan vision prayer as well, then you can sign up and be a member of the prayer community. Because that's all we're asking. We're asking people to pray daily the Lord's Prayer, read a bit of scripture, pray the diocesan vision prayer, pray for the health and growth of the Diocese of Sheffield. And we are gathering and amassing a huge number of people. I haven't got the figure on top of my head. I might get to it actually in a slide in a moment. Growing people who belong to that community, who are committed to praying together. So do join that prayer community if you feel you can. And don't worry if you miss a day. We do not believe in a God who sends hellfire and damnation on people who have the right intention but just fall away. I don't think there has been a single month since I signed up to the prayer community where I've managed to do it every day in that month. But the intention is there. So don't worry about having to be legalistic. But what we're trying to say is let's join together in prayer. Released, you'll know a lot of what you've been involved in the transformation of your deaneries into mission areas, looking at oversight ministry, focal ministry. Sally will say a little bit more about that this morning. And rejuvenated, a key part of that is growing younger. Our Centenary project is really key within that, how we actually reach young people with the gospel and help to nurture them in their faith, but also also planting new congregations, younger congregations, as they begin their life reaching new people groups across the diocese. That's our existing strategy, and we're doing all right in some of these things. I say we're about 5 years through a 7-year strategy. We now have 283 people who, through the Lights for Christ, part of our released strategy, the whole people of God for the whole mission of God, have actually now joined the personal rule of life workshops to try and work out what might this look like for them on a daily basis. We have 77 focal ministers authorised. Again, I think Sally will say a bit more, but that's more than our target by the end of the year. We've got 374 tasks completed by our support team. If you need support in areas within your church, particularly around buildings or finance or other kind of administrative areas, we've got a great team of people in our mission area support team who can help you. We've got over 2,000 people engaged in centenary project groups, young people across the diocese. 30% of our parishes are now working in mission areas, sharing resources together. And last year we did manage to gather, through your generosity, 3.34 million in our common fund in challenging financial times, but that common fund pays for our ministry on the ground. So we're doing all right in terms of our journey so far. So what are we doing this year? We're wanting to, at the end of our strategy refresh, draw alongside the national church, and we're talking to them through to say the Diocese of Sheffield is not a rich diocese. We don't have lots of historic endowments in our diocese. We've really pared back to what we believe is the minimum we can be in terms of stipendiary clergy. We can't go any lower if we're going to grow. But we've got a really good plan. And we would love to work with the national church to help us resource that plan so that we can grow. That's essentially it. And some of you will know about the triennium funding that was launched last year in our own diocese. The archbishops came to launch that. The Church of England's Archbishops' Council have just changed their emphasis a little bit in terms of how they are funding the diocese over the next sort of 9 years. You'll probably be aware of some of the terms like strategic development funding, strategic transformation funding, strategic capacity funding. You'll only be aware if you're in churches that might have benefited from some of those things. But as a diocese, we've got quite a lot of money and support from the national church through a whole range of pots. What the church commissioners have done this year with the support of the Archbishop's Council is to say, we want to bring it all together in one pot. And we want to put more money into that pot. And we want to have a longer term thinking in terms of strategy. So instead of a 3 or 5 year program, we want to be thinking 9, 10 years. But we'll still do that in 3 yearly chunks, the trienniums, which is what the church is working. But what we want to see is long term thinking that we can then reassess at the end of those 3 years and say, how is it going and how do we work with? And they're calling this the Strategic Mission and Ministry Investment Programme. And there's a board been set up to help fund that. Now, the Archbishop's Council have committed over the next 9 years to distributing £3.6 billion to the Diocese of the Church of England over the next 9 years. 1.2 billion in each of those trienniums. Now that includes more than the Strategic Mission and Ministry Programme, but what they've committed to the Strategic Mission and Ministry Programme is over the 9 years, 1.2 billion, which equates, if your maths is any good, like which mine isn't, to around 400 million every 3 years, every triennium. Okay, and if you think that roughly 40 dioceses, there are a few more than that, but roughly 40 dioceses to make the maths work, that's £10 million per diocese each 3 years, 30 million over 9 years. But they've also said what we want to do is we want to prioritise our funding partnerships with dioceses that don't have significant strategic reserves or significant endowments, and dioceses that are serving our most deprived communities. Hello, the Diocese of Sheffield. So friends, when we're talking about approaching the national church for funding to help our strategy to get the rocket to where it needs to be, we are talking over the next 9 years of in excess of £30 million we're going to be asking from the national church in terms of partnership. This is a significant opportunity that we have at this point to determine what is the strategy that will release the mission of God so that we can grow and get closer to landing that capsule. That's why we're investing so much time and energy into trying to get this right and into consulting across the diocese. There are a couple of other pots as well. The carbon net zero pot is separate, but they want to be integrated, and the racial justice pot is separate, but it needs to be integrated in strategy. The reason why there are pots of money that are separate, and we've had successful bids in both, is that the Archbishop's Council want to make sure that those two things are being progressed rather than being lost in bigger things. But it's very much integrated. I'm going to move on a bit quicker. The National Church is asking that diocesan strategies, if you're asking for partnership funding, do align with the National Church's vision. That makes sense as a funding partner. So this is the dangerous bit where the tail could end up wagging the dog. But let me just talk you through very briefly the National Church's vision. The National Church has decided that they have a vision to be a church for the whole nation, which is Jesus Christ-centred and shaped by the 5 marks of mission. I'll come on to those very briefly in a moment. A church that is simpler, humbler and bolder. And there's 3 priorities in the National Church's vision. 1, to become a church of missionary disciples. Released, anybody? 2, to be a church where mixed ecology is the norm. Rejuvenated, anybody? 3, to be a church that is younger and more diverse. Rejuvenated again, isn't it? We are really closely aligned to the national vision already. In fact, our strategy, our 3R strategy, was launched before this vision, and I think the National Church copied the Diocese of Sheffield, but don't tell anybody else that. The good news for us is that we don't have to make radical changes of direction in order to be aligned to what the National Church is seeing as its priority, because we're already doing it. And that's my anticipation out of this whole consultation, is that we're not going to be steering the ship in a different direction. You will be pleased to know as Churchwardens. We will probably keep the 3 R's as they are, but just populate them a bit differently, just to say the next stage of this is XYZ within that. So don't worry that suddenly you're going to have to kind of go, a whole new initiative, because actually we're already doing what the National Church is thinking we ought to be doing. The 5 marks of mission, if you don't know them, I've just put them on that slide. We can make these slides available. And probably one of the criticisms we had about 3 R's is that the last 3 of these are more implicit than explicit. We're very good in our 3 R's about proclaiming the good news of kingdom, about teaching, baptizing, nurturing new believers, the whole people of God for the whole mission of God. We're less overt about our social action work in our communities, which is a really important part of our discipleship, and about our work to safeguard the integrity of creation. So those things will come into a more prominent place, I think, in a refreshed strategy, and we're hearing that in the consultation that they need to. So we're beginning to look at how we respond to that. There are 6 bold outcomes that the National Church has. I'm aware of my time, so I'm not going to spend ages. But again, I'll just leave them briefly on the screen for the quick readers, and we'll make sure these slides can go around. We are already well aligned with these 6 bold outcomes. A church for everyone, a pathway into accessible expressions of church, so parish revitalised, new Christian communities. We're already doing that with our church planting and grafting and new congregations strategy. And where we're helping all Christians to grow in confidence in their faith. It's the Lights for Christ stuff again. We're already involved in doing some of this. So what we're doing this 12-month period is we're doing a wide consultation across the diocese. The deanery events are part of that, but they're not the whole of that. We're also going to make sure that we're listening specifically to those voices that are often lost. So the voices of young people, and we're working with Mike North and others to make sure that we're hearing that voice. UKME, minority ethnic, global majority heritage people, to make sure that we hear that voice. That doesn't mean they won't be feeding into the other consultations, or these people won't, but we need to make sure we're hearing some of these voices because they're often lost. People who live on our estates and in our most deprived communities, we want to hear what are your needs, what should the church be doing in your communities. We want to reflect on what is the Lord blessing in our existing strategy. because what the Lord is blessing may well be what the Holy Spirit is saying, invest here, because this is where my hand of blessing is. We want to look at what are we missing. What could we be doing if we had more resources? And, one of the things that's often come out is, there's a new housing estate growing up in our parish. We're struggling to meet the people who are already engaged with the church. If we just had a bit more resource, we could do something really exciting with the new housing estate. Those sorts of opportunities we need to find out about as well. So trying to imagine, what does a flourishing Diocese of Sheffield look like in 2032? And in order for it to be flourishing, closer to landing that capsule, what are we doing differently? And where are we using our resources differently? What new resources might we need to do that? So that in the second half of next year, we will be putting a request to the National Church for some partnership funding. The first half of next year, we'll be forming that strategy and consulting across the diocese. What are we hearing so far? And I just want to get you doing a bit of chatting around the tables, and there's some, I won't use the post-it notes because somebody else has put them out, I think, but we'll do a bit of chatting. What are we hearing so far from our consultations? These are the things that are coming out loud and clear from the deanery consultations so far. Don't be off-put by these, because you don't have to say these things if you've still got your deanery consultation. I just thought it might be interesting for you to know what we're hearing at the moment. These are the key areas. A real desire to be more collaborative, to share resources together. We're hearing that on the ground from people, which is such an encouragement, because that says to me that the last 5 years, we are shifting the culture a bit from a parochialism to parish churches working together to serve the mission of God. A strong desire to engage with children and young people, more specifically with schools and in our areas, and how we resource schools ministry. Social action activities done in partnership with others within our community that the Lord is blessing that, and we want to be doing more of that in serving local need. And then greater support, building on the Lights for Christ, so that we as disciples, as followers of Jesus, can grow in our confidence about our faith, so that we can be those who share the faith with others. So that 120 disciples gathered at the Ascension were empowered by the Spirit to literally transform the world. We can be those people. So that's kind of what we're hearing so far. And I think I need to stop now. That's just a bit of a summary. And I'd love you, I think we've got about 5 minutes, haven't we, Javid? Is that right? I've waffled on for too long again, I always do. I hope that's been helpful, just to give you a bit of background as to what we're doing. I'd love you just for the next sort of 4 or 5 minutes around your table, maybe in twos or threes, just to say, if you could have, or if you could benefit from a better resourcing at your church. I cannot promise another vicar for every church. I cannot promise a youth worker for every church. But let's just start to think, what are the things we're missing? What are the opportunities we're missing? And how might we be able to do things differently if we were just resourced a bit better to meet the mission of God? Does that make sense? What are the sort of ideas that you might have in this room? And then we'll just have a brief opportunity just to hear some of those, and I'll pick at those. But do make sure you're feeding in other ways, and I'll leave my details and Alex's details on the screen. But have a bit of a chat around your tables, and then we'll just gather a little bit of that. And if there are 1 or 2 questions, we might have time for that, but I am going to keep time so that I don't eat into Sally's time. But have a bit of a chat around your tables.